deserving winner is found, a prize is awarded to the one person in all the world who has done the most to work for peace. This is the Nobel Peace Prize. On December 10, 1964, in Oslo, Norway, this honor was awarded to Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr., a 35-year-old black American and the youngest man ever to receive the award. He won it because he was the leader of a peaceful movement to gain for every American, no matter what color, the rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness that the Constitution promises. These are called civil rights. The story of this man's life, a story of great courage in a search for truth and justice that would not be stopped, began in Atlanta, Georgia in the early 1930s with the Boyhood of Martin Luther King, Jr. ML, that's what friends in Atlanta called Martin Luther King, Jr. when he was a boy. His father, Martin Luther King, Sr., was one of Atlanta's leading black ministers, and so was his grandfather before that. Everyone in their part of town knew and liked ML's family, and their house was always open to visitors. Growing up, in many ways, was a happy time for ML. He lived with his mother, father, grandmother, older sister, and younger brother in a comfortable house in a middle-class neighborhood. ML had plenty of good food to eat and nice clothes to wear. Young Martin had many playmates before he started school. Some of them were black, some of them were white, but they enjoyed being together, playing together, sharing as good friends too. No one cared what color anyone else was then, but time would change that. All too soon, ML would learn all about prejudice, an ugly word that means simply to judge someone to be bad or wrong before really finding out anything about that person. If you only like people with blue eyes, you may be prejudiced against those with brown or black or green eyes. People who are afraid of others, who are different from them, often turn their fear to prejudice against the others. Then they teach their children to fear, and so prejudice spreads. This is just too much hate for any one person to handle. Martin was hurt by it. Then, when ML was just 6 years old and was about to enter first grade, something happened to his closest friend. He was a white boy whose father owned a store across the street from the King home. ML and his friend had always been together. And what happened then wasn't anything they did, but they could never be friends again. Because one day his friend's mother told ML he couldn't play with her son anymore. All she said was, "We are white, and you are a Negro." And that was that. Whites went to white schools, blacks to black schools, and friends were forgotten. Until then, ML had felt he was equal to anybody. The church was a very early influence on Martin. In 1934, when ML was just 5, a traveling preacher came to Atlanta to hold a big religious meeting at the Ebenezer Baptist Church where ML's dad was pastor. During the meeting, the choir sang. And they clapped and waved their hands and shouted while Mother played the organ for the Ebenezer choir. And ML and Grandmother Williams sat in the family pew. Martin was learning again how people of different ages and backgrounds and abilities could get along very well with each other. I just love this choir. Don't they sound good today? Let me get an amen today. Is there anyone here who would like to pray and have his prayers answered? Maybe you need the Lord. Maybe your heart is troubled. If so, just open up your hearts and let the grace of God flow in. All you've got to do, children, is lift up your arms and praise the Lord. Praise the Lord. Praise the Lord. As the sermon ended, the preacher leaned forward and invited anyone who wanted to come up and join the church. So, come forward, brothers and sisters. Come forward. First, ML Emil stood up. Then he raced for the pulpit. As a boy, he couldn't let anyone get there ahead of him. Just the need to keep up? Well, maybe. Or maybe Martin was in a hurry to let everyone know what was important to him. In a church where everyone was welcomed equally and everyone helped each other out was always important to him. Church was Emil's second home. He was there every chance he got. For Sunday school classes, along with all the other boys and girls from the congregation. There was so much he had to learn, and this was such an important part of growing up. And so were the worship services in church every Sunday. Then there was Sunday dinner. Yes, Emil and the church got along just fine. And it gave direction to his boyhood world. It taught him to get along with people, something he did as a boy and then for the rest of his life, and to help people who needed a hand, who had had a harder life than he, to get a fair chance. More than most boys his own age, Emil grew up in an adult world. He probably didn't realize how much he was learning at the time about life and about people. He learned patience when he sensed something was wrong and he knew he was still too young to do much to change it. Watching his parents, he learned by their example that all people are important, the young and the old, the rich and the poor, no matter what the color of their skin or where they came from, that everyone should be treated with respect. Emil's father was a man who fought for the things he believed in. When Martin was only 7, Reverend King Sr. led the 1936 Atlanta March to fight for voting rights for blacks. Even earlier, Emil's grandfather Williams had been pastor of the Ebenezer Baptist Church. He also was one of the leaders in getting the city to build the Booker T. Washington High School, the only high school for blacks in all Atlanta when Emil was a boy. Martin's father had worked his way through this high school and through Morehouse College, too, to become a minister, a bank director, a man that people looked up to. So much, in fact, that he became one of the black spokesmen the city always called on in times of crisis. He taught Martin Jr. to be proud of himself as a black boy when he took him out of elementary school for 2 years and sent him to a special black school with fine teachers from Atlanta University. Emil studied hard and got good grades. He learned about great black men like Frederick Douglass, who rose from slave to writer and statesman, of George Washington Carver, a quiet genius who developed over 300 products from the lowly peanut and 118 from the sweet potato, and of Booker T. Washington, educator, leader, friend of presidents. These, among others, were men who spent their lives helping their people. They were great models for Emil, who was growing up fast. When the special school closed and Emil came back to Booker T. Washington, his grades were outstanding. Martin remembered the lessons he learned as his father had, and his grandfather before him. Emil was to become a man with a job to do. And Martin's family taught him the value of working hard and playing hard. He learned always to try his best. Even as a minister's son, Emil delivered papers and mowed lawns to earn a little extra money. He worked hard and he played hard. In football and baseball games, friends said he played so hard you couldn't tell whether he was playing or fighting. He didn't always win, but he'd always try his best. And it was this way all his life, this drive that was to make him a leader when he grew up. He learned as well on the playing field to stand up to competition and to stand up for his rights, for others' rights, and for what he believed in. Everything wasn't always perfect for Emil. Life wasn't always happy. Long before he was in his teens, Emil had discovered what it meant to be black in a white man's country. He remembered what his father had told him about the way blacks were treated on plantations. And as each day passed, young Martin made one discovery after another. He was the preacher's son, but he couldn't buy lunch at downtown stores because he was black. If he was thirsty and there wasn't a colored water fountain in sight, he just had to stay thirsty. If he was riding on the bus he'd have to sit in the back. And if a white person got on and every seat was taken, he'd have to give up his seat. Blacks had to ride in different taxis than whites. As we've been told, blacks went to separate schools, and often the tools to learn were not exactly equal. Prejudice came up again when blacks tried to work. No matter how hard they may have trained for a trade, they usually had to take work no one else wanted. Finally, even though the Constitution had given blacks the same rights as every other American, some people didn't see things that way. These are just some of the things Emil had to learn. Things that had been happening before he was born, and that continued as he grew up. Things that he knew were not fair at all. When he became a man, he would say it for everyone to hear.
I have a dream. One day, this nation will rise up, live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal.
In his short lifetime, Martin Luther King Jr. did much to advance the cause of civil rights in America. Rights to equal education, use of public facilities, jobs and voting, among others. He did it peacefully because he knew he was right. And an entire world watched that day in 1964 when the courageous young black American won his Nobel Prize. Growing up, Martin Luther King Jr. was like many other children, but he learned how to pick a goal and stay with it. He found out what was most important to him, and he learned to recognize people who were a good influence on his life. Using your own abilities, setting your own goals and sticking to them, choosing the right kind of influence, you too can do more than you ever dreamed possible.